Ben Tzvi, if we could do it in the Shmosai.
Who? Who is it?
My namesake. Shlomi Yehuda. My name is Shlomi Yehuda. Ben Tzvi is a great-grandfather of mine that I'm named after. His yahrzeit is today. So, if you don't mind.
Is that Michael Tress?
Michael Tress was his wife's grandfather, yeah.
So today I'd like to speak about the concept of Mamlechus Kohanim, and I'd like to tie up certain things that I really have. I'd like to tie up certain concepts that have never been tied up, and I'm going to speak a lot about things which I never really said before on the concept of Mamlechus Kohanim and where that is in the Torah, and what does that have to do with all the stuff that we're learning and so on. Okay, so let's start. So we said last time, and I explained it, that because of the sin of Adam Rishon, okay, Nam Neksufa was divided into two parts. The first part of Nam Neksufa was the defect with the Rabbanu Shalom in mind. In other words, the self-awareness of a person places the Rabbanu Shalom outside of consciousness. That's what it means to have self-awareness. And when a person sees the Rabbanu Shalom, he sees him as an outside figure and as an outside entity. And the Rabbanu Shalom said that's completely false. I am not outside of you, I am inside of you. In other words, I am you, even though you're not me. But I am you, I am the foundation of your self-awareness. And that problem that the Zolosoi, a person has with God, is that because he's self-aware, he sees God as outside of him, and therefore that falsifies the relationship that a person has with God. In other words, because he sees him outside of him, the person refers to God as you. But in actuality, God is not a you. He's not a second person pronoun. He's a first person pronoun. He's part of the I or part of the me. And this is what God wants us all to realize, that that he is part of the me and he is not a you. And when that is done, and how do you do that? Through the mitzvahs, and especially through the mitzvah of Ahavta Hashem Lakecha, and you shall love God. Because once you love someone, true love means that you feel someone is part of you. He's not outside. He's actually part of your being. And that's Masakin, that corrects the Indian of Nam D'Ksufa Bein Adam L'Makom, between man and God. Anyway, when Adam sinned, the concept of Nam D'Ksufa between man and God was intensified. So now not only did he see God as outside of him, but he also saw his fellow man outside of him. In other words, there was a new dimension of Nam D'Ksufa that had never existed before. Now, from now on, every man would see another person, every man and woman outside of himself, and that would threaten him. That would threaten his sovereignty. That would threaten, in a certain sense, his divinity, or the aspect of his divinity. And by being threatened on it, therefore, he would try and overcome that. And the way you overcome the threat of another person existing, and therefore making you not a universal being, but a specific being. In other words, as long as there's other people besides yourself, you cannot see yourself as a center of self-awareness and as a creator. You are disempowered. So the existence of another person is also a you, and it empowers you just like the existence of God. Nam D'Ksufa is where the existence of God and the existence of another person both disempower the entity who has self-awareness. and who believes in certain ways that he has God-like powers. So therefore, there were two mitzvahs that were given. And you should love God. And also, the other mitzvah that has to do with love is another person. The concept of love is the tikkun, is the correction for the problem of Namlik Sufa as it applies to God and as it applies to another human being. And this is what was critical in the sense of Adam Rishon. And this sin therefore divided Namlik Sufa to another dimension of Bein Adam Chavero, between man and man. In actuality, as I once mentioned before, the whole story of Cain and Abel, the two sons of Adam Rishon, had to do with the tikkun of Namlik Sufa as it relates to Bein Adam Chavero. And that's why the Torah mentions this story. Because really, why do I have to know the story where one brother kills another brother? That's a horrible thing. But it seems to me, why is that story so fundamental that it's mentioned in the Torah as the second story of Adam Rishon? There's something about the event of Cain and Abel which is fundamental to spirituality. And that was because only they were after Adam Rishon, the only one who could rectify the sin of Adam Rishon was Cain and Abel. That's why their story is mentioned, because on a certain level, they had the power which once belonged to Adam Rishon. And they were supposed to demonstrate to each other a caring and a love. Cain and Abel were supposed to be two brothers who loved each other and looked out for each other. They should have been concerned about each other's welfare, but they were not. Both Abel and Cain were, although Abel did the much worse thing. Cain did the much worse thing in the sense that he killed Abel. But even Abel was somewhat remiss on this, because instead of Abel being concerned that Cain was not as spiritual as he was, and did not bring the korbanos to God because of lishma, because he intended to do this for pure reasons, Abel should have been concerned about his brother's position and stature when it came to spirituality. But Abel was really only concerned about himself. So therefore, Abel also had a dereliction of duty in the sense that he did not love Cain. He did not demonstrate a caring and a concern where he would be concerned about Cain's inability to reach a high level of ruchnius. And therefore, he should have been, in a certain way, assisting Cain in this way, not representing himself as a line of demarcation where different Cain. These two brothers would be completely differentiated in their spiritual stature. Cain would be of a lower stature because he couldn't bring the korbanos as the way he should have brought, and Abel would be higher in stature because he brought the korbanos that he had to bring, the vegetables and so on and so forth, the shema. But he was not concerned about his brother. So therefore, those two brothers who should have been masakin, they should have corrected the namlik sufa as it relates to Bein Adam Chavero, between a person and another person, and instead they made it worse. Not only did they fail to love each other, but Cain killed Abel. He did one of the worst mitzvahs in the Torah, which has to do with Sitzach. But that story is included in the Torah to tell us that these two people had the possibility of correcting the sin of Adam Rishon, and had they been loving to each other. That's what God means when he said to Cain, I Hevel Achicha, where's your brother Abel? In other words, what does that mean? He was saying to Cain, where is your brother Hevel? In other words, where is this concept of brotherhood? That's what I'm asking you. I'm not asking you where is the location of Hevel. I'm asking you, I Hevel Achicha, where is Hevel, your brother? Are you still his brother? And obviously God was implying that Cain had killed Hevel. And therefore the brotherhood that used to exist between the two no longer existed. So therefore, the story of Cain and Abel is a critical story, almost as important as the story of Adam Rishon itself. So after Hevel and Cain, after the story of Cain and Hevel, we get into the next 10 generations, which is the Dor HaMabul, the generation of the flood. Because after 10 generations, the accusing angels said to God, I see that 10 generations have passed in the human species, in the race of men, and they still not have Mesaken, the Chet of Dam Ksufa. They are terrible to each other. Not only are they terrible to God, but they are terrible to each other. They exhibit no form of love whatsoever. They rob from each other and do all kinds of sins against each other and so on and so forth, with total contempt. So therefore, God decided to destroy the door of HaMabul, the door of the flood, by bringing the flood on the world and starting all over again with a new family. And that family, of course, would be the family of Noah. So then in 10 generations later, after Noah, the generation again decided to rebel against God. But they did not sin against their fellow man. So in other words, the flood, the 10 generations that wound up in the flood, had tremendous contempt for God. They were against God, and so on and so forth, and they were against man. But the next 10 generations, which is Dor HaFlogah, the generations of the differentiation of language, the people were friendly to each other, and they had a certain level of respect. But they still had a major problem with the existence of God as an entity who was outside. They could not see God as other than a you. So therefore, even though in a certain sense they were masaken, the hate, the sin, between man and man, because only the Dor HaMabul transgressed this sin to a great extent. But the Dor HaFlogah, which is the next 10 generations, they respected each other. And the only thing was, they wanted to rebel against God. So therefore, in a certain sense, they were masaken, the Indian on a certain level of Ben Adam Chaveroi. But they kept the Nam Ksufa, the mum of Nam Ksufa, the defect of Nam Ksufa, as it relates to God. So therefore, after both of them after all 20 generations, again the Satan, the accusing angel, accused mankind of betrayal of his fundamental purpose. So he said to God that it's time that you should annihilate them, because they are no longer worthy of their existence. Now, at that time, the fundamental thing was God decided that man should masaken Nam Ksufa. And what that means that man would attain the level of a Goy Kodesh. A Goy Kodesh means a holy people, a holy nation. And how would they attain that status? They would obtain that status by being in love with God, and being in love with their fellow man. So in other words, they would attain the level of a Goy Kodesh if they were able to masaken both forms of Nam Ksufa. But even the Dor HaMabul, the Dor HaFlogah rather, even though the Dor HaFlogah, they weren't so bad between each other, they still rebel against God. So therefore, they did not keep the concept of Goy Kodesh. They were not a holy people. And therefore, they could not represent God in Olam Haba as the Zulasoi. They would have to be annihilated. So at that time, God decided to change the structure of mankind. Whereas initially, God decided to make man, starting with Adam Rishon, the first man. And after the sin, God decided to make the Zulasoi, the person who would earn Olam Haba, that's called the Zulasoi. He would make that, what do you call it, into the human race. Mankind would become a species. They would become the human race. And whereas initially, where Adam Rishon had to do the tikkun of the chet, and where Cain and Abel had to do the tikkun of the other form of Nam Ksufa, now this function, this purpose, was given to all of mankind. So all of mankind as a single species had to attain the level of Goy Kodesh. Both the Dor HaMabul and the Dor HaFloga both had to attain the complete tikkun of Nam D'Ksufa. Nam D'Ksufa as it relates to Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, and Nam D'Ksufa as it relates to Ben Adam L'Mokom, between man and God, and man. And if they would have kept it, they would have attained the status of a Goy Chodesh, a holy species, a holy creation. And then they would in both generations, they would have been a Zochet Olam Haba. But they did not keep this thing. So therefore God decided to change the structure. No longer would mankind as a totality, as a unity, would be the agents of becoming a Goy Kodesh. The Dor HaMabul, the generation of the flood, and the Dor HaFloga, the generation of the tower, which they built to fight against God, to war against God, would no longer be the possession of a single species and a single race, the human being. Now he would divide the human being into two. He would divide the human being into those, to those people who would no longer be a Zulasoi, and those people who would be the Zulasoi. In other words, eventually, he would create two nations. One nation was Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, the descendants of Abraham. And if they accepted that role, they would be not only the superior, because they are the closest to God, but they also would represent another concept besides Goy Kodesh. They would represent the concept of Mamlachos Kohanim. They would be a kingdom of priests. So not only would they would be a holy people, a Goy Kodesh, and earn the right to inhabit Olam Haba, but they would also be, in this case, Mamlachos Kohanim, of kingdom of priests. In other words, where they would become the example for all of the mankind for the proper behavior of the tikkun of Nam D'Ksufa in all categories. They would save mankind, even those people who did not want to become a Goy Kodesh. Those people that did not want to become a Goy Kodesh, a holy people, therefore became Goyim. So God said, if you accept this new covenant of 630 commandments, you will be a Goy Kodesh and a Mamlachos Kohanim. And if you don't accept it, then you will be a Goy, one of the nations of the world. And by my right, I have the right to annihilate you, because you will not be in a position to carry out my will. But I have mercy on you, and I still love you in the way I do, and I want to uphold your existence. But your existence will now be dependent, really, only on 7 mitzvahs of Noah. The 613 commandments in the Torah would not apply to you. What would apply to you was the 7 commandments which originally were given to Noah. And that would apply to you. And with those mitzvahs, you could earn the possibility of residing in heaven in the future world. In a world which there's no time and space. It's a world where you're nene, where you take the pleasure from the Shina Tzchelt. So you will have a relationship with me, God said, through the acquisition of the 7 mitzvahs. If you perform the 7 mitzvahs, and some say you have to perform the 7 mitzvahs as a chassid, you have to go even beyond the normal 7 mitzvahs as a tzaddik, and you have to be a chassid. Those you have to go with full force ahead in keeping the 7 mitzvahs. And if you keep the 7 mitzvahs, I will let you reside in Olam Haba. But you will not be able to create Olam Haba. In other words, the only way a person can create his chelet, his portion of the world to come, is if he perform the Taryag mitzvahs, the 630 commandments. That is the only vehicle and the only device which allows a person to literally create a portion which would be eternal. If he does not create that portion, because he does not accept the 630 mitzvahs, let's say he would only accept the 7, then he could still reside in Olam Haba. He can still be a being, an entity in that future world, but he would have no ability to create that world. So therefore, we see that the world, mankind, was divided into 2. Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, who both can reside in Olam Haba and can actually create Olam Haba. It can build it, because they are doing the full complement of mitzvahs. And then he would divide the world between the Jews, Klal Yisrael, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And then he would designate the rest of mankind to be Goyim. In other words, they would not have the ability to create Olam Haba. They would only have the ability to reside in Olam Haba to some extent because of the 7 mitzvahs. And therefore, they would not have the inyan of a 2 Goy Kodesh. They would be a Goy Kodesh only in terms of 7 mitzvahs. They would not be a Goy Kodesh in terms of Tayag mitzvahs, since they refused to accept it. And at Sinai, when God gave to all the nations of the world, he offered them to take the Torah, which is composed of 630 mitzvahs, not 7 mitzvahs, and not 1 mitzvah, not the 1 mitzvah of Adam Rishon, and not the 7 mitzvahs of Noach, but the 630 mitzvahs which were given at Sinai, Har Sinai, to the Jewish people, and they accepted. But they would still be a Goy Kodesh to Goyim, at least in terms of the 7 mitzvahs, and that would entitle them for residence. There was another great gift that God gave to the Jewish people. Because the Jewish people accepted the 630 commandments, they were given another gift. Not only would they be a Goy Kodesh, a holy people, but they would be a Mamlechus Kohanim. That was the second gift. And what is the Mamlechus Kohanim? It's the task of being the example, being a model, being the paradigm of what a true Zulosoi is. What is a true Zulosoi who earns Olam Haba and also creates Olam Haba? That is the Mamlechus Kohanim, and that he would teach to the nations of the world, and thereby he would save them all. And that's why it says also by Avraham Avinu, "V'nivuchu b'chol kol mishpachos shel Adam." Your people, your children that come from you, who will be Jews, who will be people who accept the Torah in terms of 630 commandments, they will have the schus to save humanity. They would save all the Umas HaOlam, all the nations of the world. And therefore, you are the gatekeepers to Olam Haba. You are the gatekeeper. You are the ones who will determine who goes into Olam Haba and who doesn't. And you will be able to save the Goyim because you will teach them what I have taught you. You will teach them what it means to be a Goy Kodesh. How to masaken the Namrak Sufa that comes between man and God, and between Adam Lachaveru, between man and man. You will teach them how to behave in instances. You will make all the nations of the world along with you a Goy Kodesh, a holy people, and a Mamlech Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. To who? To the Goyim of the world. They will also learn the correct behavior that has to be done in order to at least reside in Olam Haba. So this was the great gift that God gave to the Jews. Not only would they get the schus, the merit for creating Olam Haba itself, and not only would they gain the merit of being able to reside in Olam Haba, but they would gain the merit of being able to save all of mankind. The redemption of mankind is in the hand of the Jews. The Jews are the gatekeeper, and that's why they are the most important nation to God, because through them, God will save all of humanity. But God gave them another gift, a very powerful gift, which distinguishes them from being the Zulosoi of the Dor HaFlog and the Dor HaMabel. In the generation of the flood and the generation of the differences of languages, what God gave them was 7 mitzvahs, but they were not guaranteed to get Olam Haba. In other words, if they would transgress on those 7 mitzvahs, then what would happen is they would be subject to the loss of Olam Haba. And it's only through the Jews that they will be able to regain Olam Haba. So there the Zulose was a single race of humanity, and they were not guaranteed to hold that up. If they would transgress the sins of the 7 mitzvahs, they would lose everything, and they would not even reside in Olam Haba. The only reason why Goyim can reside in Olam Haba is because of the schus, the merit that the Jews give to the Goyim, in the sense that the Goyim are allowed to now become a Goy Kodesh on a certain level, so therefore they can reside in Olam Haba. So the Jews were given a gift of guarantee that they could not lose. They will never lose the gift of being a kingdom of priests in Olam Haba. How do I know that? That's because Chazal, the sages say, a Yisrael, a Jew, even though he sins, Yisrael, he always remains a Jew. In other words, he retains the ability to create Olam Haba. God said, I will never confiscate that ability, and he retains the ability to reside in Olam Haba. Both abilities are retained by the Jew. But the Goyim, who gave up the 7 mitzvahs, they will lose the ability to create Olam Haba. They will lose it forever. And they will only have to get it through the merit of the Jews as the gatekeepers. But they will be able to reside in Olam Haba through the 7 mitzvahs. So the Goyim are not guaranteed. They are not guaranteed Olam Haba at all. And the only reason why they keep Olam Haba, they can even get it, is because of the mitzvahs, the 7 mitzvahs. And if they don't do that, they have nothing. Nothing. So therefore we see that the worst thing that a Goy can do is to become an anti-Semite. Because a Goy doesn't realize when he's anti-Semitic, when he hates Jews, when he creates another religion, which includes anti-Semitic features in that religion, when he hates Jews, like the Christians hate Jews and the Muslims hate Jews, when they see the Jew as secondary, as inferior to the Goy, and they create a religion which is based on the hatred of Jews, then what happens? They jeopardize their entire ability to go to Olam Haba, even when they keep the 7 commandments. Because the Jew is a device. It's the kingdom of priests which retains the ability to save them. And when they become anti-Semites, they're committing suicide. Unfortunately, the Goyim do not realize that. Every Christian who's an anti-Semite, every Muslim who's an anti-Semite, every person, every Goy who's an anti-Semite completely jeopardizes his ability to enter the future world, which is nitzchias, lasts forever. And if they realize that, they would completely stop. But they haven't realized that. They've continued with their anti-Semitism throughout history. So therefore we see a very important thing. Jews has the gift of being the Goy Kodesh, the holy people that earns Olam Haba, and they also have the gift of Mamrak Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. And that's what it says in the Chumash, the Torah, that the Jews are both a Goy Kodesh and a Mamrak Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. And when does that apply? In the Yemos Mashiach. That's exactly what the Yemos Mashiach is. The days when the Mashiach comes, the whole world will change, and the Jews should have acquired the Yemos Mashiach in those days at Mount Torah, at Har Sinai. That at that time the Jews were supposed to receive the Torah, which was the 50th gate, which was the Messianic light, and that Messianic light would initiate the Messianic period. And from that time on, they were supposed to what? They were supposed to makarav. They were supposed to draw nearer to God, all the nations of the world. But because of the hate of the Egel and because of the sin of the Meraglim, God confiscated that from the Jews on a certain level. And the rest of human history refers to a confiscation of the concept of Mamlokos Kohanim. And we will really look into this in a much deeper way. The Jews, even though they try and maintain the Goy Kodesh level, they try and be a holy people. And to some extent they've achieved that, at least historically. But basically, what has been confiscated from them is to be a Mamlokos Kohanim. They no longer possess that virtue to be a kingdom of priests to Goyim, all the nations of the world. And we see throughout Jewish history the continuous confiscation of Mamlokos Kohanim, because ultimately the Mamlokos Kohanim feature is viewed in the Yemos Mashiach, when the Mashiach comes and brings a complete shleimus to Klal Yisrael. At that time, the Jews will be the total model, the paradigm to what a Goy Kodesh is. And he will therefore have the schus of being Mamlokos Kohanim and having saved the world from annihilation. So when we look at the rest of Jewish history, we will now see how the concept of Mamlokos Kohanim relates to them. What do I mean when I say that the Jewish people have lost literally lost this stature of being Mamrak Kohanim, of being a special person to the nations of the world, to save the nations of the world. What do I mean by that? So therefore, I would want to go into this now and tell you several incidents that refer to the loss of Mamrak Kohanim. And most of these incidents, unfortunately, is really not known. The Jewish people do not really understand the loss of that property, that feature, that characteristic of a Mamrak Kohanim. And we see clearly that as the Jews progressed in history from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that they gradually lost that feature. So I want to discuss that feature throughout history and to see exactly. Because in the end, that's what we have to do, because the Yemos of Mashiach, the days of the Mashiach, has now gone into Golus. The Jews have finally lost the Mamrak Kohanim feature in an entirety. And that's what it means, the Golus of Klal Yisrael. The Golus that we have now, that I once said before, is the Golus of not of the Jewish people. It's not the Jewish people themselves who are in Golus, because they still have the possibility of being a Goy Kodesh. By doing the 630 commandments, they can bring a Yeshua to themselves as a holy people. But they have lost the ability to be a model for the nations of the world. And that ability has been taken away from them, and actually it's been given to someone else. That's right. Because the Jews have lost that ability to be a paradigm, to be a model to the nations of the world. That chus was given to someone else. And now we shall discuss the whole feature of Mamrak Kohanim as it relates to the Jewish people. What I once said before, and I'll have to explain it again, when Yitzchak, the patriarch Yitzchak, Isaac, when he gave the blessing to Esau and Yaakov, the two brothers, part of his blessing was the statement, Kol Yaakov, and the voice is the voice of Jacob, V'hayadayim de Esau, but the hands are the hands of Yitzchak, of Esau. And what exactly did that mean? He was saying that both brothers, Esau and Yaakov, have the ability to be a Mamrak Kohanim. Not only do they have the ability to be a Goy Kodesh, a holy people, but they have the ability to be a model for all of mankind, both Yaakov and Esau. But what he said was, therefore, both of these people had the chus of being a Mamrak Kohanim. You see it. But both of them would have to remain a Goy Kodesh. But if they tampered with that possibility, then they would lose the Mamrak Kohanim. And because Esau became a Russia, and therefore that's why Yitzchak confiscated the bracha from him and said, you cannot be a Mamrak Kohanim b'kedusha. You will never be a Mamrak Kohanim, even though you will attain the ability to be a Mamrak Kohanim instead of your brother Yaakov. When Yaakov is a Goy Kodesh, true Goy Kodesh, and he keeps the mitzvahs ben adam l'mokom ben adam chaveroi, right? Then Yaakov will have the ability to be a Mamrak Kohanim to the nations of the world. But if Yaakov does not perform well, if Yaakov loses that ability, so you, Esau, will retain the ability. Why? How could Esau retain the ability of being a Mamrak Kohanim when Esau is a Russia? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But that's what God said to Esau. You are still the Bechor. You are still the firstborn. And that cannot be changed. Even though the spiritual status of the firstborn can be taken away from you, but the physical status of the being a firstborn cannot, and you still remain the Bechor of Yaakov, and therefore I can give you as the Bechor to be a substitute for Yaakov when Yaakov will lose the ability to be a Mamrak Kohanim. That's right. You will retain the ability, but you will retain the ability through your hands. Yaakov, the ability to be a Mamrak Kohanim is gathered by Yaakov. How? It's gathered when Yaakov teaches the Torah, when mankind learns about the Torah and gradually begins to develop Torah thinking. You see it. Even though, for example, Christians are Christians and they believe in the divinity of Jesus, which is completely false, but yet they still have the ability to teach mankind the Torah thinking, and the same with the Muslims, because both of these religions have Torah thoughts in them. They're very similar to Torah in a certain way, but at the same time, they're very different, because both of these religions, especially the religion of Christianity, is an idol worship. Islam is not an idol worship because they believe in God as a single God. But Christianity is a form of idol worship because it believes that God has a son, and that's impossible. God doesn't have a son. All of mankind is the children of God. There's no specific. You can have a tzaddik, you can have a person who's a very holy man, and therefore he's a higher son. But no son of God could ever attain the stature of divinity and become God himself. That is absolutely ridiculous. And if you have any understanding of who God is, how powerful God is, and how far away he is from us in terms of his actual being, called Atzmusai, which I will say in the future, or which I've said in the past, you would understand that to have divinity given to a man, a human being, is totally impossible. But yet Esau was given the possibility of distributing Torah thinking among the Goyim. Because a lot of Christianity is in essence a messianic religion. It's a belief in the religion of the Mashiach, that the Mashiach will come and redeem mankind. And so on. They believe that Jesus, Yeshu, is the Mashiach. But more than that, they believe that he's a divine figure, he's the Son of God, which is completely false. Esau not only is not the Mashiach, he is not the Son of God. You see it. And that's completely false. So when Yaakov lost the ability to be a Mamrak Kohanim, Esau was given that ability. You see it. He was given the ability, so the Christians took over the earth. The Christians became the dominant religion. God gave a certain hatzlocha, certain success to the Christians, that they would become the most powerful religion on earth, and their nations would be the most powerful on earth. And Islam was also given a certain hatzlocha, a certain success, that they would be also very powerful, but for a different purpose. And we'll speak about that next time, what the purpose of the Muslims are, and the persons of them, what the purpose of Mohammedans are. It is different. But the Christians are the true surrogate Mashiachs. They have taken over the ability to teach the world the thoughts of the Torah and the concept of God and the concept of the kingdom of heaven, which are basically, fundamentally, they are Jewish concepts. And Esau was given that purpose to be a surrogate Mamrak Kohanim. Islam was given another purpose, not only to be a surrogate Mamrak Kohanim in a certain way, but they were given the purpose of the Golos of Eretz Yisrael, and I shall speak about that next week. But where do we see this concept of Mamrak Kohanim on the sons of Yaakov? Where do we see this? And where do we see that the Mamrak Kohanim was such a boch to Klal Yisrael? Well, the first place that we really see it, where it becomes doable, is from Yosef Hatzadik. The question that we have to ask really is, why does the Torah talk about Yosef Hatzadik and the fact that he was sold by the brothers to Egypt? Why do I have to know this story? It was a terrible tragedy that the Shvatim, that the 11 Shvatim sold Yosef, basically, and they put him on a caravan to Egypt, and he went into Egypt and became a slave. And then he had to run away, and then finally he was able to interpret the dream of Pharaoh, and therefore he was made the prime minister of Egypt. He was the second greatest official in the land of Egypt underneath the Pharaoh. Why is that important for the Torah to tell us that story? What does that story have to do with the Jewish people? The Jewish people were in the house of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They had nothing to do with ancient Egypt. So even though Yosef went down to ancient Egypt to become the prime minister, what does that have to do with the Jewish people, and why is that a story told in the Torah? No one really answers that question, but the answer is really clear. Because Yosef knew that his purpose was to make the Jews a Mamrak Kahanim. That's right. The purpose of being a kingdom of priests and beginning to show the nations of the world what the truth is about spirituality belonged to Yosef Hatzadik. Yosef Hatzadik went to Egypt to Makarov the Egyptians. It says that Yosef sold food to the Egyptians in the famine, but he only sold them food if they would perform the ritual of circumcision. Circumcision is a ritual where a Jew joins the covenant of God to become Jewish. That's the mitzvah of circumcision. It's a symbol of the covenant of God that the Jewish people will always be a Goy Kodesh and Mamrak Kahanim. And what Yosef did was he circumcised the Egyptians as he was giving them food. So the question is, why was Yosef doing this? What did the Egyptians have to do with the process of circumcision? Nothing. So why was Yosef doing this? Because the fact is, Yosef was trying to make the Egyptians into Jews. Because circumcision, a bris milah, is a symbol of the covenant, the bris between God and the Jews. He was giving this covenant, extending this covenant to the Egyptians so that they would be worthy to receive the Torah. Yosef knew that God would eventually offer the Torah to the Egyptians as well. And the Egyptians were the most powerful nation on earth. So if Joseph could convert the Egyptians to becoming Jews and believing in God and accepting the Taryag mitzvahs, then he would be able to save all of mankind, because Egypt, being the strongest nation on earth, would be the people who then would demonstrate to mankind what the Yemos is. So Yosef was the fundamental single individual who represented the beginning of the concept of Mamlachos Kahanim. It was through Yosef Hatzadik, being the prime minister of Egypt, that would initiate the concept. Besides, even though Avram Avinu also was a kind of Mamlachos Kahanim, because he would go around, him and Sarah would convert many people, trying to make them see the truth of God. So Avram Avinu was actually the beginning of Mamlachos Kahanim, but Avram Avinu only dealt with individuals. Yosef dealt not with individuals, he dealt with a whole nation, the nation of Egypt. And Yosef himself, as prime minister, was the Mamlachos Kahanim that was applied to the nations of the world to save them for Olam Haba, so that they would go with the Jews or help the Jews go to Sinai and receive the Torah. Egypt was supposed to be a Jewish nation. It was supposed to be part of the Jews. And that's why Yosef went to Mitzrayim. Therefore, Yosef of Mitzrayim is part and parcel of the destiny of the Jewish people. It's not a story about Yosef. It's not a foreign story about Yosef. It's the essence of what Yosef was. He was destined to go to Egypt. He was destined to makarv them. And he was destined to take the Egyptians with the Jews to Har Sinai, to the Mount Sinai, and receive the Torah. And they would all have become the Jews, just like the Egyptians that were Jews who were Erev Rav. But it was the tachlis, the destiny of Egypt, to become Jewish too. And that's why the Torah mentions it, and that's why the story of Yosef Hatzadik is so critical. It's part and parcel of what the Jewish people are in their function of Mamlachos Kahanim. You see it. That's why Yosef went to Egypt. He didn't go to Egypt because he was sold as a slave. That's how the brothers got him there. But that was through a mechanism of a sin. The brothers who sold Joseph did not do right. They did a terrible thing. And they sold Joseph, who they were jealous of. Because what happened? Joseph had two dreams. In both dreams, he dreamt that he was the head of the Jewish people. All the tribes bowed down to him. So when he told that to his father and his brothers heard this, they suddenly became very jealous of Joseph. And Yaakov, realized that there's something in these dreams of Joseph. By seeing himself as the king or as a chief produce, the sheaf of corn, by Yosef seeing this, he saw himself as the leader of all the Shvatim. And what God was showing him, that he would be the one that would initiate the concept of the Mamlachos Kahanim to the nations of the world, starting with Egypt. But what happened? The brothers were jealous of him. They did not understand the dream. They did not understand that they were supposed to join with Yosef Hatzadik together, 12 tribes. And all together they would be Mamrak Kohanim, they would be a kingdom of priests. God wasn't simply saying that Joseph was superior to them. That wasn't the basic aspect of the message. He was trying to tell them that he would lead them by going to Egypt first. He would lead them to become a Mamrak Kohanim. He would be the leader of that role, of that destiny. But all of them together would perform the destiny. They all would go to Egypt, and they would all try and carve Egypt. That was the message of the dreams. But the brothers misunderstood. And they saw it as a way for Yosef to declare his superiority over the other brothers. So therefore what they did was they first tried to kill him by throwing him into the pit filled with snakes and scorpions. And then after that they decided not to do that. They picked him up from the pit and they sold him as a slave on a caravan going to Egypt. So Yosef went to Egypt as a slave, as a prisoner. That's how he went to Egypt. That's not the way Yosef was supposed to go to Egypt. Even though that was his destiny. He was supposed to go to Egypt with Yaakov and all the brothers. All of them were supposed to go to Egypt so that they can take over the Bechor. That was the purpose of the reason why they went to Egypt. So they would take over and become the firstborn of the nations of the world. They would acquire that from Egypt, which was originally the Bechor of the Bria. Egypt was initially the Bechor, the firstborn of the world. But Egypt was supposed to transfer that schus, that koyach, to the Jews because they worshiped idols. So the Jews were supposed to transfer the Bechor status of humanity to the Bechor status of the Jewish people. When they became the Bechor of the Bria, they now became the firstborn of the world. And how? Through Yosef Hatzadik. And how? Through the brothers, to the other Shvatim. But instead, the brothers sold Yosef as a slave, so Yosef had to enter Mitzrayim in a golus. That was the klipa, that was the golus of Yosef in Mitzrayim. Yosef went to Egypt and went into exile. That's what it was. It wasn't supposed to be that. It was supposed to be a schus. It was supposed to be together with his brothers and with his father. Sold as a slave individually and had to go into Egypt as an exile. So we see the great crime in a way. It was criminal what they did, the brothers. By selling Yosef, in a certain sense, they tried to block his ability because by selling him as a slave to Egypt, what they didn't realize, they were trying to make him a slave and a prisoner, whatever it was, and therefore they unknowingly decided to try and destroy Yosef's Tzaddik as the beginning of Mamrak Kohanim. Instead of Yosef initiating that tachlis to the world by selling him as a slave to Egypt, Yosef was neutralized. He was nullified. As a slave, he could not convert anybody. He could not represent God in any way until finally God gave him the possibility by interpreting the dreams of Paroi. But they made it much more difficult for Yosef to initiate his task, his destiny as a Mamlachas Kohanim. And that was the sin of the 11 tribes. Their sin was they tried to interfere with the destiny which God gave to Yosef and to them and tried to nullify that destiny. And that was a tremendous sin and so on and so forth, which we will speak about in a minute. So therefore we see what resulted from this. What resulted from this was a completely different story. Where Yosef went to Mitzrayim as a slave and became a prisoner because of the test of the wife of Potiphar. And then Yosef was made a prime minister of Egypt, the greatest one in Egypt, because he was the only one who could interpret the dream of Paroi as it was. So Yosef still kept his destiny. It says as long as Yosef was alive, Egypt actually had a kiruv. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that directly. But when it says in the Torah, Vayokom melech chodesh, a new king arose, a new pharaoh arose that enslaved the Jews. What does that mean? How could a new pharaoh arose and suddenly contaminate the reputation of Yosef? Yosef was a tzaddik. He was considered a tzaddik even by the Egyptians. The Egyptians knew who Yosef was. They knew his spiritual stature, because they buried under the Nile River or close to it, so that the Nile River would continue to overflow, because they saw Yosef HaTzadik as a very holy man, and Yaakov, his father, as a very holy man. And therefore they were willing to accept the Torah that the Jews were supposed to get at Sinai. That's right. But when it says Vayokom melech chodesh, a new king arose, he suddenly realized that he would not be part of that destiny. He would not be part of the destiny of the Jewish people of Klal Yisrael to what? To accept the Taryag mitzvahs, to be able to what? To be able to get Olam Haba and to live and create Olam Haba. He decided to go backwards and to go back to his Avodah Zorah. He decided to retract on the whole tshuva that the Egyptian people were doing. Why? Because the Jewish people also started worshiping the idols of Egypt. And when Paro saw that the Jews started to worship Amun-Ra, the god of Egypt, he said, what are these people? I thought they were holy people. I thought they worshipped God. What are they doing worshiping Amun-Ra? He was our God. So therefore, the Jews are false people. They are not a Goy Kodesh, and therefore I will enslave them. So the only reason why Paro in the end enslaved the Jews, because they fell from their status of being of the 12 Shvatim. Once Yosef died and all the brothers died, the Jewish people started worshiping idols. So in that case, what Paro did was he retracted on the tshuva of the Egyptians, and the Egyptians went back to the Avodah Zorah, and therefore after that it became a huge conflict for the Jewish people to leave Egypt. And go to Sinai, because now he was against it, because now he worshipped idols. But I'm not going to go into this. This is all I'll say on that story. So therefore we see that the whole tachlis of Yosef was to be a Mamrak Chanim, was to convert the Egyptians and the nations of the world, and all of them would participate in some way on receiving the Torah of the Taryag mitzvahs, and that would have been the Yemos HaMoshiach, where the entire world would have been blessed by being part of the Yemos HaMoshiach. When the Torah was given, that Torah was the 50th gate, which is the light of Mashiach. And had they accepted the Torah, and all the nations of the world would have become Jewish, then God would have said that I'm now going to give you the Yemos HaMoshiach at the days of the Mashiach at Har Sinai. That's when the Yemos HaMoshiach was supposed to happen, at that time. But it didn't happen because of all the things that I've said. But that was the tachlis of Yosef, which the brothers contaminated with an evil deed. Now we will see the story of Yosef again. We see the story of Yosef again. Where do we see that story? All of us say we read on Yom Kippur and on Tisha B'Av. We all read a certain story in the Kinnis and in the Tefillas of Yom Kippur. And that's the story called the Asor Haruga Malchus, the 10 martyrs who died. The last one having been Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef. What is that story? Hadrian was the emperor of Egypt. He was the emperor of Egypt. And therefore Hadrian called over, and he was thinking about it, and he got certain information that he was surprised. He got the information that originally the brothers sold Yosef as a slave to Egypt. And therefore he called over certain rabbis and said to them, what is the punishment of someone who kidnaps his brother, sells him as a slave? What is the punishment in your Torah about that sin? So they said to him, it's the death penalty. So Hadrian, the emperor of Rome, said to them, well, what happened? Did the brothers of Joseph who sold them die? Did they have a consequence of this behavior? And they said, no, nothing was done to them. So he said, then I will do something to them. I will kill 10 of the greatest righteous men, tzaddikim, of the Jewish people. And I will consider their death to be the death of the brothers. They will die for the shvatim who sold Yosef. That's what Hadrian did. So Hadrian went ahead and killed 10 of them. These were the greatest men in all of Klal Yisrael, and so on and so forth. And their death, by different ways, they were very great men. Hanania ben Teradyon, Rabbi Chutzpah Turgaman, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, very great men. And the Romans killed them over the course of a certain amount of time as a substitute for the brothers who sold Yosef, because that's what should have happened to them. Now we say that tefillah, we say it on Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av. Why do we say that? The fact that these 10 people died? Okay, I feel sorry about that. It was a terrible event. The greatest of the tzaddikim of Klal Yisrael died. And I understand this is a tragic event. But why is this so important, any more important than when other Jews died? There were episodes of pogroms, the Holocaust. 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. And in a certain way, there were many things, the Christian persecution of Jews and the Muslim persecution of Jews. My God, if you read Jewish history, you read nothing more than pages dipped in blood. So therefore, why is the death of these tzaddikim, why is the death of these tribes, besides Joseph, these tribes that sold them, why is it so substantial that for some reason we would say a tefillah and report the story of their death and say this on Kippur and then Tisha B'Av? Well, what's that about? I have not seen an answer to that. And I believe that the reason why we include those in the tefillahs of Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, because still they were the greatest tzaddikim around. But there's something wrong with that answer. Even though they were greatest tzaddikim, but they cannot match the amount of slaughter that the Jewish people have experienced in their entire history. So again, the question is, why is this story mentioned? And I believe the reason why it's mentioned is for a certain reason. Hadrian was trying to do something, although he didn't realize what he was doing. And this is a very deep thought. Rome was about to take over as a substitute Goel, a substitute nation model for the Jewish people. That was the tachlis of Esau. Esau was about to become the new surrogate messianic religion. Esau was about to copy the Jewish people. How? It's supposed to copy the Jewish people in establishing itself as a Goy Kodesh and Mamrak. That's really what Christianity is. Christianity is really a Goy Kodesh, and they say it. They say that they are the new Jews. God made a new covenant with them and made Jesus the Mashiach. And therefore, they are the holy people. They are the new Jews. And not only that, the Christians say, and what is our purpose besides worshiping Jesus? Our purpose is also to spread the Christian religion, the worship of Jesus, and the function of Jesus as saving all of mankind throughout the world. We Christians have to go now throughout the world, conquer different nations, and instill in them the holiness of Christianity, that we are the Messianic people. The Jews used to be the Messianic people. They were canceled by God. This task of the Jewish people used to have that task, but now it was confiscated. We are now the new Jews. This is called the new covenant. Christians believe that they are part of the new covenant. The new covenant means what? A new holy people and a new Malmus Kohanim. They now take the position of the Jews. And in some way, Hadrian understood, and exactly how he understood this, I don't know. It's not really recorded. But there's something that Hadrian understood, and all the Romans understood. In fact, it was something that was known by the Romans and by the Jews themselves. The Jews knew that in the year 4000 was the time for the Mashiach. That's why 4 Tanoim, 4 sages, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, these 4 sages, Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya, Rabbi Shimon ben Azai, and what do you call it? The fourth one. They knew that the messianic Benzoma, right? I think it's Shimon Benzoma. But anyway, they knew from these four Tanoim knew what were they after. It said they entered the garden. And I'm going to say something which is very radical, but I believe it's true. I don't really have any proof of it, but I believe it's true because it so fits in to the period of Rome at that time. These four Tanoim went into the garden. What does the garden mean? The garden really refers to the 50th gate. It refers to the 50th gate, which is the light of the Mashiach. Why do they think they can get it? It failed to get it at Matan Torah and so on and so forth. How did they think they could get it? Because they knew, it said in the Medrash, that the first 2,000 years of history is called Torah. The second 2,000 years of history is called Torah. And the third 2,000 years of history is called Yemos HaMoshiach. And what does that mean? That means that God said, even though the Jews are not zocher, they're not zocher to bring the Messianic period. And they're not zocher because of the Lashon Hara and the Sinas Chinam. I will still bring down the 50th gate, which is the light of Mashiach. But what I will do, I will put not the Jewish people in exile, but I will put the 50th gate in exile. I will conceal it. I would hide the 50th gate of knowledge and the 50th gate of wisdom. And in the next couple of weeks, I will explain what this means. But I will send down the 50th gate, and I will keep it down on the earth. It will be like Emes Me'eretz Titzmach. The Emes, the 50th gate, will be born from the planet Earth itself. It will be housed in the planet Earth. How it's housed, we will speak about later on. But God said, I will bring down the 50th gate, and it will remain amongst men. It will remain where will be. It will remain amongst the Jews. It will remain amongst the Christians. It will remain amongst these people for the rest of human history. And that's why these Tanoim knew that that was the possibility of what happened. God was about to initiate the Yemos HaMoshiach, the days of the Mashiach, either one way or another. He was about to initiate the B'der Kedusha and the holy path, where the Jews become the Mamrak and teach the nations of the world the concept of the 50th gate, or he was about to initiate where the 50th gate would go into Golus. It would go into exile, so that the Yemos HaMoshiach would go into exile itself, so that the last 2,000 years of human history would be the exile of the Yemos HaMoshiach. It would not be the biblical period, but would be a period called the Yemos HaMoshiach, the days of the Mashiach. That would become the last 2,000 years of human history. And in order to do that, he would bring down the 50th gate to the world, to these Tanoim, to distribute it to the world itself. And somehow that knowledge was not simply a Jewish knowledge, even though that's stated in the Medrash. But I believe that many people at the time of Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, at the time of the 10 Martyrs, knew that. That's right. This was known, this fact that God was going to bring down the 50th gate so that it would become available to the Jewish people. See it. It would become available through who? Through the Mashiach himself, who was who? Akiva ben Yosef, Rabbi Akiva. He was the person who would become the Mashiach, and he would take the 50th gate through the garden. And even though the Jewish people knew this, but also the Goyim also knew it, Rome knew it. And that's why Rome was so concerned if anyone would declare himself a Mashiach and declare the kingdom of God. Why was Rome so concerned when Jesus declared himself with the kingdom of God or Mashiach? You know, if that's what he did. Why was Rome so concerned? Rome was the mightiest empire on the planet. There was no ancient empire as great as Rome. The power of Rome was awesome. So why was they so concerned about this guy, this fellow Jesus, who simply declares himself as Mashiach, you know? And why was they so concerned? Why didn't they consider Jesus a crackpot and so on? Why did they see to it that they would have to kill this man? Jesus would have to be tried in the Roman courts under Pontius Pilate, and he would have to be condemned, and he would have to be put on a cross, and he would have to be killed. Why were they so concerned to kill Jesus? Jesus was only one man, a simple person who claimed to be Mashiach. That's what he did. So why do you kill? I mean, let him claim what he wants to claim. Jesus had no power whatsoever. He had no power at all. How could he have been a threat? Because a single individual declares himself to be Mashiach, but nobody even accepted him, really. The Jewish people did not accept Jesus as Mashiach. So he wasn't even accepted. So Jesus at best would have been a failed Mashiach. Why did the Romans consider themselves so threatened by the existence of this man? And that's a very serious question. And the answer, I believe, is because they knew, like the Jews, both of them knew that at this time in history, at the time when the Romans would have been the major empire in history, the Mashiach, some aspect of the Mashiach would come down to the world. They didn't know what aspect, but they knew something about the Mashiach, which the Jews are waiting for, will actually be realized. It would actually be achieved. So therefore, they could not afford to let anything go. They would have to kill anyone who claims to be Mashiach, because that would be a threat. Why? Because they believed somehow that Medrash is true. That the Medrash that says that the last 2,000 years of history would be the Yemos Mashiach, they believed this was true. And therefore, that's why they killed. So what happened? Because they believed that it was true, they went after Jesus and they crucified him and so on and so forth. And that's why Hadrian also believed it was true. How Hadrian got this information, I don't know. In some way, I don't know where he got this information from, but suddenly Hadrian heard this concept that the Jewish people would begin the Messianic period in the year 4000, which was at that time. Which is at the time of the 10 Martyrs. It was at the time of the Roman Empire. So therefore, he believed that he had to take care of it. He had to deal with that possibility because he believed in the possibility. You see, the Roman people hated the Jewish people. Why? Because they considered the Jewish people their true enemy. Even though the Romans conquered all the Mediterranean countries and their empire went all the way up to England, but the Roman people considered the Jewish people as their arch enemy. Why? Because of their Kedusha. They knew something about the temple. When the temple existed, this was not a simple building. They knew that there were certain miracles that were associated with the temple. So they knew that there was something about the Jewish people which was unique. So therefore, the Medrash, the thought that the possibility of the Messianic period taking place by the Jewish people was real. It was not a fantasy. It was something that they had to consider the possibility. The Jewish people would be the ultimate enemies of Rome. They had the power to do it. How? Through the Mashiach. So therefore, they were constantly looking for any Jew who claimed to be Mashiach, and they would kill him immediately because of the possibility that was true. And Paul, who's considered the father of Christianity. Christianity is called Paulinism because he was the main apostle. It was Paul that differentiated Christianity from Judaism. He was the one that made it possible for all the Goyim to become Christians. Before that, in order to become a Christian, you first had to become Jewish. In other words, Christianity was only simply a sect of Judaism. It was considered a sect. It was people who believed in Jesus, that they believed that he was Mashiach. Now, in actuality, there's no prohibition. I mean, if certain Jews considered Jesus to be Mashiach, that was false, but that wasn't a sin. You can believe who you want to be Mashiach. That's not a sin. If he is Mashiach, he is. If he's not, he's not. He could be a Mashiach and still fail. So therefore, the belief in who the Mashiach is not a sin in of itself. So Paul understood at the time of Jesus that if he would separate Christianity, not that it was a Jewish sect, but if Christianity would become its own religion, he would be successful. Paul understood also the Medrash. So the Jewish people knew the medrash that the Yemos Mashiach would start now. The Romans also knew that, and also Paul knew that. And therefore you have this triumvirate. So that's why Christianity suddenly became so powerful. And that's why the Romans decided to become Christians. Because they believed that somehow the Jewish people would be involved in some kind of redemption, which was a threat to Rome. So what I'm saying is that Paul also knew it, and that's why Paul created the Christian religion. The Christian religion before that was simply a sect of Judaism, but Paul separated Christianity, the belief in Jesus as Mashiach, and formulated the belief in Jesus as a God, and so on. And therefore, Paul was the one who created the religion of Christianity. Why did God give it success? Why did Christianity become so successful? Because God wanted the Christians to become the new Jewish surrogate. Because the Jews lost the ability to be Mamrak, a kingdom of priests. That ability would be given to his brother Esau, and that would be given to the Romans. From the Romans would proceed the nation that would convert mankind into the religion of the Mashiach. That's right. When Constantine became the emperor, which made the Christianity the central religion of Rome, he made Christianity, therefore, the model, the Mamrak Kahanim for the entire human race. And from that point on, they began to spread. First there was the Christian Empire, there was the Roman Empire, then there was the Byzantium, the Byzantines, who were Christians also, in Constantinople. But Christianity started with the Romans, and it went into a completely different religion, which I will talk about later. But Hadrian knew this thing too. So therefore, Hadrian knew what these Tanoim were doing. He knew who Rabbi Akiva was. He knew who these men were, that they were tremendous tzaddikim. I mean, their reputation was known throughout Eretz Yisrael, throughout almost the world. And Hadrian realized that. And he realized that they were the ultimate what? Enemy of Rome. Because if they, through their Kedusha, become the model of Mamrak Kohanim to the world, Rome would be lost. So what did he want to do, Hadrian? What he wanted to do is, guess what? And this is the most important thing. He knew that the brothers killed Joseph. And because they killed Joseph, they contaminated the concept of Mamrak Kohanim, because Joseph was the first one who would demonstrate that. And he knew something. He knew that if he can rectify the sin, how? By finding 10 great tzaddikim to die instead of the shvatim, he would rectify the sin of the death of Joseph. That's right. He would rectify the fact that Joseph was sold as a slave and kidnapped and sent to Egypt. He would rectify that sin. And therefore, what would he accomplish by rectifying the thing? That whole sin is a Jewish story. It's in the Torah. What does it have to do with Hadrian? Why should Hadrian be interested in rectifying the death, the enslavement of Yosef Hatzadik? Since when, what was it? Yosef, was Hadrian a Jew? No. He had nothing to do with that. So why would he be interested in killing the 10 martyrs? Why? It's not that he killed the 10 of them. It's why he killed them. And why did he kill them? To rectify, to atone for the sin of selling Joseph. Now, why would he be interested in that? Why does a guy want to rectify the sin of the Shvatim? And there's one answer. Because in some way, Hadrian knew that Klal Yisrael had the bracha of Mamrak Kohanim. They would be the nation of the world that, due to the bracha of Yitzchak, would have a bracha of Mamrak Kohanim. They would teach the world the truth of God and the truth of the Torah. That was their destiny. So therefore, he knew that if he somehow rectified what the Shvatim did, he would repair the damage done to the feature of Mamrak Kohanim. In other words, he would earn the ability to have the feature of Mamrak Kohanim. Rome would become the most powerful nation in the world. That's what it would be. He would be able to earn himself to be the surrogate Mamrak Kohanim. That's what Hadrian was trying to do. And that's why he was so concerned about the tachlis of what was involved. That even though the story of the cell of Yosef was a Jewish story in the Torah, he knew that it somehow applied to the Romans, to the Jews, and to the Christians. He knew that it all had to do somehow with that, and he knew the one way to earn the ticket to become the Mamrak Chanim. It's true, it wouldn't become the Mamrak Chanim to teach the world the knowledge of God. No, it would be the Mamrak Chanim to teach the world the power of Rome. That Rome become the most powerful nation on earth, because not only would they have the blessing of being Romans, they would have the blessing of the Jewish people. If they rectify the sin of the sale of Joseph, he would therefore atone for it and therefore restore the possibility of a Mamrak Chanim. But instead of the Jews getting the possibility, because they lost that possibility, they were no longer Mamrak Chanim. Right? They were no longer Mamrak Chanim because they sold Joseph. So they lost that. But he believed that that blessing would now go over to the Roman Empire, and therefore they would become totally the mightiest nation the world has ever seen. So that's why he wanted to kill the 10 martyrs. But in actuality, what did he do? Did he accomplish that? No, he didn't. But he did accomplish something else, which he has not realized. In order for God to forgive the Jews and bring the HaMoshiach, God would have to rectify the sin of the sale of Joseph. Right? God would have to do it. And eventually someone would have to take the place of those tribes. So God brought the death of the 10 martyrs on the Jewish people so that he would rectify the state of Yosef. And what would that do? That would allow the Jews to live in Rome, and for the rest of human history under Christianity and Islam, it would allow the Jews to live and survive. It's because of the death of the martyrs, the 10 Haruge Malchus, that gives the Jews the schus to be able to live in the Golus of the HaMoshiach. How would the Jews survive in the Golus for 2,000 years? How would the Jews be able to live in the Golus of the HaMoshiach? How would they be able to do it? Because God would rectify the sin of the 10 Shvatim, the 10 tribes. How? By the death of the 10 martyrs. It was God who was doing this. He was atoning for the sin of the sale of Joseph. And by atoning for the sale of Joseph, he would be atoning for the sin of the Shvatim. And therefore, it would be possible for Klal Yisrael. They would then earn the schus that they would be able to survive in the Golus of the HaMoshiach. Hadrian was doing it, so he would be able to replace the Jews and have the power of the most powerful nation on earth. Not only physically, but spiritually. He would rob the Jewish people of their messianic destiny, and he would take it for himself and for the Romans, and therefore make the Romans the most powerful nation on the earth. He would therefore rob the Jewish people not only of their physical destiny. That's why he changed the name of Eretz Yisrael to Palestine. It was the Romans who did that. They changed the name of Eretz Yisrael to Palestine. Now, why would the Romans want to do this? Why would they want to change the name of a country? You conquered the country. You are now the lords of masses. But why do you want to change the name from Israel to Palestine? Doesn't make sense. No, because he was trying to rob the Jewish people of their kedusha. Not only their physical presence, but their kedusha. So therefore, he changed the name of Eretz Yisrael, which was the Mokom Kodesh, where the Jewish people lived, where the temple was. Israel wasn't simply a country. Israel was a center of spirituality for the whole world. The name of Eretz Yisrael was synonymous with the center of Kedushat in the world. And he wanted that. So he changed the name to that. And what name he chose? Palestine, after the Philistines, who once conquered Israel too. Just like the Philistines conquered Israel in their time, on the time of Shimon, Agibor, Samson, and Delilah. At that time, the Philistines oppressed the Jews. So he wanted to obtain the same bracha for the Philistines. Just like the Philistines were able to conquer the Jews and destroy the Mamrak Chanim, he would also retain the status of the Mamrak Chanim and take away that. But he would rob the Jews physically and spiritually. By how? by killing the 10 martyrs and renaming Eretz Israel with a completely different name based on an empire that conquered them 1,000 years before. So Hadrian knew what he was doing. We think that Hadrian was a Roman emperor that didn't know anything. We think that Rome knew nothing about the Jews. That's not true. I believe that Rome knew exactly what the Jews were doing. Rome knew exactly who the Jews were. Rome knew the power of Judaism, the Beis HaMikdash and the Tanoim, and they wanted that power. And by killing the 10 martyrs and by atoning for the sin of selling Joseph, he believed that they could obtain to be a surrogate nation, that there would be the mightiest nation of the the mightiest nation in the world. So this was a very contrived philosophy. Not only the Jews knew of the HaMoshiach in the year 4000, but the Goyim knew, the Romans knew it, and the Romans knew it exactly what that, and Paul knew it. So therefore, all three of these things, the Asura and Malchus, the Romans, and Paul, all depended on this knowledge that in the year 4000, the Jews would finally totally lose the HaMoshiach and the power of the HaMoshiach, because Rome would become the surrogate for this. So therefore, this share is a very novel share. I have never said this stuff before. I have never said about the unity of knowledge between the Romans, Paul, the Apostle Paul, or the Jew Paul, and the Asura Malchus, that all three of these parties were all coming from the same knowledge, from the same center. And that's where suddenly we realize what's going on. Now it's understandable why the Romans were so afraid of the Jews. Even though they conquered the Jews, they were frightened of the Jews. They were frightened of the power. And therefore the conspiracy to usurp the power of the Jews by atoning for the enslavement of Yosef. And why Hadrian wanted to be concerned about the slavery of Yosef and the atonement of this. That he was interested to atone. Why? So that he can take the power of the Jews. So we understand now how all three are connected. We understand how the Asura Malchus, why we say that prayer on Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, which has to do with the HaMoshiach. Because Yom Kippur is a substitute day of Shavuos, like I said. It's the time when the Jews received the 50th gate. It was supposed to be the 50th gate that we got. We lost it. But therefore, Yom Kippur was the substitute day for the HaMoshiach. Tisha B'Av has to do with the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash symbolized the true exile of the Jewish people, but not the exile of the Jewish people in a new nation. Tisha B'Av is not about the exile of the Jewish people in Rome, and it's not about it in Babylonia. What is it about, Tisha B'Av? What is Tisha B'Av? Tisha B'Av is about the destruction of the temple in the Yemos HaMoshiach, because the temple was really not destroyed. I'll explain next time. It was simply changed. The Shekhinah was still there with Klal Yisrael, but it was there on the Western Wall. And what Rome wanted to do was take that away from the Jews, to destroy the temple and to rebuild the temple. And what was the rebuilt temple? Well, like I said last time, I say next time, the Colosseum. But we'll speak about that next time. So suddenly we see a unity of what happened in history at the time of the Romans. That somehow the Asura Malchus is connected to the Yemos HaMoshiach. And therefore they are somehow connected to the Romans under Hadrian and even before. And that's connected to the birth of Christianity under Paul. All of them were working under the same rubric of knowledge. This was the knowledge that was available to them all. Now, I know where the Jews got this knowledge. I know Rabbi ben Yosef and the other three Tanoim knew this from the Medrash and what the Jewish tradition. How Hadrian knew this, I don't know. Paul probably knew it because he was a Jew. Paul was a Jew, and it's very possible that he learned that Medrash. That's how Paul knew it. He knew that that time was supposed to be the HaMoshiach with the 50th gate. So that's why he used that to build up Christianity to a new religion. But how Hadrian knew it, I do not know. So therefore, we see what's the result of all this. Simple, that Christianity is a surrogate of the Mamlechus Kohanim of Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael lost that schus because of everything that happened to them. And that schus was gained by Rome, Esau. They would now be the surrogate messianic country. From Rome to Christianity, you see it. They would now uphold the Mashiach as the Son of God, and they would uphold the concept of the Mashiach as the Redeemer of mankind. And this is the story, I believe, how all the parts fits in. And this is what I believe to be true. Okay. Any questions?
Yes. I have a question. Hadrian, you say, his mind was performing a kapara, an atonement, by killing the 10 martyrs. But
right, so he can get the bracha of the malchus of the greatest nation on the earth.
But usually the bracha would go to the one who's suffering under the killing. They are the ones who would be getting the atonement. Traditionally, that's how atonement works. You suffer, and you gain atonement through your suffering. He wasn't suffering.
But they got, but the Jewish people got they got the atonement, and they earned something. You know what the Jewish people of Klal Yisrael got because of the Esau Malchus, the death of the 10 martyrs.
Surviving the Golos, surviving Christianity all those years.
And what we didn't, they should, wait a minute, they should not have survived. Why? Right. Because they went down to the worst midst of all. What?
Why did Hadrian, why were the Romans able to gain anything from this?
Well, because in a certain way, they were descendants of Esau. In a certain way, they took over the descendants of Esau. It was their portion through the bracha of Yitzchak that they would become the surrogate messianic kingdom, Mamrak Kohanim. Somehow Hadrian knew this. That's why Hadrian was so threatened. Why was Hadrian so threatened by the Jews and by a messianic revival? Jesus represented no messianic revival at all, that the Romans should take care of it. It didn't make sense. But the Romans saw the Jews as the ultimate enemy, their arch enemy, in the spiritual terms. And Hadrian understood that only if he's mechapa on the sale of Yosef could he in some way be zocher to take that from the Jews. But the Jews also benefited from that. And that's the reason why the 10 martyrs were killed, to atone for the slavery of Joseph and thereby allow the Jews to survive for the next 2,000 years. And that was a tremendous, even though they didn't deserve to survive.
You're saying that Hadrian saw it as a schus to...
Yes. He didn't understand it totally. He did. I don't believe he totally understood what was going on, but he knew enough to know that he wanted Rome to be the most powerful nation on earth. But the spiritual power behind that bracha lay with this bracha of Mamrak Kohanim of the Jews, with their Beis Hamikdash, with their Torah. So he knew that in some way he would have to usurp the tikkun of Klal Yisrael. And the only thing he knew he could usurp is by gaining the bracha of atoning for the bracha of Yosef, because the bracha of Yosef was associated with the Malchus Kohanim. Where did the first one who was supposed to produce the Malchus Kohanim, you mean? Where did the Malchus Kohanim go? Goy Kodesh or Malchus Kohanim? From Yosef. Yosef was the manifestation of the first time that the Jewish people went international. The Jewish people were never international before that. With Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they were not international. They were domestic, Eretz Yisrael. But they became international. which means the first manifestation of the Jewish people as a Malchus of Kohanim was with Yosef going into Egypt and being Makar of Egypt. So therefore, that's why Hadrian knew he had to atone. So if he atoned for it, he would get the schut of being a surrogate, not the Jews themselves. They never atoned for it. He killed the tzaddikim. And therefore, it was his deliberate attempt to atone for the slavery of Yosef that did it. So therefore, he would acquire the tachlis of the Jewish people, which is to be the mightiest nation on earth.
But atonement usually takes the form of the person who gets the atonement is the one who is the sufferer, not the one who inflicts the suffering.
No, that's the atonement is on the. But that's not what it is. The Jews did capture a schus. You sound like the Jews got nothing from it. That's what allowed the Jews to survive in Golis.
Why would Hadrian get any schus for killing them?
Because he was destined. No, listen. It was the Romans who were from Esau. They were destined by the bracha of Yitzchak to acquire that.
Understood.
That's why he knew he was the one that was supposed to get it, but he didn't know how to do it. He knew the Romans did terrible things. They had over 100 million slaves. They conquered the whole Mediterranean. They were brutal. Rome was one of the most brutal empires that existed. He knew that in order to acquire a spiritual schus of this concept of Malachus Kohanim from a spiritual standpoint, he would have to do some kind of big mitzvah. He would have to eliminate the 10 biggest Tanoim. And not just eliminate that. That wouldn't give them the schus. Just to eliminate the Asura Mughal Malchus would not give them the schus. But to eliminate that, in order to masakin, in order to mechaper on the sale of Yosef, that was something else, because he's the bezdin. He made himself the bezdin. He is the bezdin of who? He is the bezdin of a chet that was done 1,500 years before. But by making himself the bezdin, he had a certain righteousness, and God agreed with him. I mean, any guy that would want to become mechaper of the Jewish people by killing the highest tzaddikim, and they're doing it for the schus, to mechaper for the Klal Yisrael, that's a mitzvah. He wasn't doing. He said, I'm not going to kill you just because I want to kill you because I see you as a threat. This wasn't a war of two enemies. This was a war of two edifices. It was a war between two messianic possibilities. This was much higher than this. He knew he was supposed to. He, as a descendants in some way from Esau, Rome knew that they were supposed to forget that. He didn't know at that time it was supposed to be Christianity. He didn't want it as Christianity. Paul lived later on, I think. But what he wanted to do was to get the Kedusha that propelled that schus. And he could get it by saying, I'm the bezdin from Yosef Hatzadik. I bring the 10 tzaddikim as against the 10 shvatim. And therefore I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm mekayim the din. The essence of Torah is din. Is din, justice. There was never any din. So he said, I will be the din. Since I am the pervading malchus, right? It says that the Jews have to obey the rules of the kingdom, of the goyim, right? So he said, look, I'm the goy.
In the eyes of Hashem, you're saying that in the eyes of Hashem, he was performing a mitzvah.
Yeah, in the eyes of the Satan, in the eyes of the Midas Adin, he was able to represent the Midas Adin. You have to understand the depth of this. He wasn't just killing. He wasn't just killing rabbis. That wasn't his purpose. He was creating a bezdin, which then would promote justice. Dina de Machusa Dina.
This was Ketrugim, you're saying? Ketrugim.
Yes, there was always a Ketrug on Klal Yisrael. And because of the Ketrug of Klal Yisrael, you see, look, Klal Yisrael was always under a certain Ketrug because of the sale of Yosef. They never escaped that. And that's why their ability to be a Mamrak Kohanim faltered. It was much less. They were never able to be exiled among all the nations of the world to makarv them. It never happened. Klal Yisrael lost the tremendous power. Even the Esau Shvatim, they lost the power of Mamrak. What do you think happened to them? And I'm going to speak about this probably next time. I'm going to go through the history of Mamrak and show you how this was being lost by Klal Yisrael over and over and over again, because the Kippur against Mamrak was always there. It was never atoned for, because the Shvatim that sold Joseph never received their consequence.
Yeah. You see, this Hadrian wasn't a Pashut guy. First of all, he was learning Torah.
Yeah,
right?
He got it somewhere.
He asked them permission, and Rabbi Shimon went up to heaven to see if it was a Gzeira. And Gabriel told him that heaven agreed to this psak. He also see that there was, and I believe there's a story in Gemara that Hadrian initially wanted to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, and then somehow he decided to pull back. Did you hear that story? And change the measurements. There's a story like that in the times of Rabbi Shua. Klal Yisrael wanted to revolt because Hadrian gave them permission to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, and then he changed his mind, and he couldn't pull back because he's the Emperor of Rome, but he told them you have to change the measurements, and the Klal Yisrael knew you can't change the measurements of the Beit HaMikdash. And that's the famous story Rabbi Shua told Klal Yisrael. But you see, he was trying to do something big in spirituality.
What Hadrian was trying to do was a spiritual event. It was not a physical event. The world thinks that Hadrian was against the Jews, and it feared the Jews like it feared any other nation. It was a rebel. That's not what happened. Hadrian feared the Jews because Hadrian knew that the Jews were the highest people on earth. They were a Goy Kodesh, and Hadrian knew because they had the Beit HaMikdash. So that's why Hadrian and later on the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. They had to get the Jews in their guts, and the guts of the Jewish people are their souls as the highest nation on earth. And I don't know if Hadrian had a rabbi consultant. Maybe he had a rabbi who was a consultant. You know what I mean? Because you find there were Jews who snitched, Jews who told on, there were Jews who were traitors. There were a lot of Muslims. I don't know who told this to Hadrian, but Hadrian clearly believed it. And what Hadrian did was a bunch of Jewish different activities to give himself the power of the Mamrak of being the greatest nation on earth. And God agreed with him because he came in the name of Dina de Machusa Dina.
Yeah, but he'd have been better off not bringing a kapara to Klal Yisrael and leaving Klal Yisrael in a weakened state. And that would have given the ability to do what he wanted to do even more so, because the Kitrug would have been greater on Bnei Yisrael.
No, it would not have been greater. You cannot compare to leave Klal Yisrael in a weakened state than to take over the power of Klal Yisrael. What are you talking about? To leave Klal Yisrael in a weakened state, okay, that's one goal. He didn't want to leave them to go. He wanted their power. He wanted to be the Mamrak Shanim. He wanted to be the mightiest nation on earth, the mightiest international nation on earth. You know, he didn't care just to leave the Jews in the weak state. He would have been satisfied with that.
That's the schus from Esau he would have had.
Yes, but he couldn't get that schus without doing something with Kedusha. He had to do something which was spiritual and which made sense. The mechapa on the Avera of the Shvatim made sense because it was a real Avera. It was a real Chorban. So he knew if he can capture that, if he can capture the schus of doing that, the Rebbeinu Shalom himself would agree to that. And he was right. Otherwise, I don't think the story...
Here's the answer. How he learned. This is who taught it to him. You look in the piece where we say Musaf and Yom Kippur. The piece starts off Ela Esker. The second piece is Belomdei Sefer Mepi Mishulei Arema. So you look in the Mefarshim over there, they say that he forced the Sanhedrin to teach him the whole Torah. Apia Medrash, Nosan HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Leiv HaKesis Sharoimi Limud Torah, Smoishim Picha Chomam V'Zekanim, and Mesinisha Sanhedrin Meshulam Larei Mizchitim. It's a Gemara that he forced the Sanhedrin to teach him what's going on.
Who?
That's how he knew the secret. Hadrian.
Who? Oh yeah, where's that Gemara?
I'm reading you from the Machz of Yom Kippur. It says,
So then I'm right. I'm right. I wasn't aware of this Gemara, but otherwise I saw it because the story.
I was reading it this Yom Kippur, and I was like, why did he get the Sanhedrin to teach him the Torah? I had this diak, and I moved on. I'm looking at it now. They bring a medrash in Eila Esker that he forced the Sanhedrin to learn with him Torah sessions. They learned the whole Torah. The Machzah says that he was haven v'diktik b'das shumas. It means v'haven v'diktik ha-Torah hativ shebeksav. He learned the Torah very well. He was after something.
Now the story makes sense. You see, I took this whole shot from simply that in order to make the story make sense, the story makes no sense on the surface. It doesn't make sense why Hadrian had to kill Jesus. I mean, not Hadrian, Pontius Pilate. It doesn't make sense why the Romans had to destroy Jesus. Jesus was not a threat. He was a nobody. Most of the Jews rejected him. So why did they have to go after him? And they had to make a whole hullabaloo of this thing. I mean, it was like a whole party. It was a huge ceremony, his death. Why did they do that? And why was Hadrian afraid of the Jews? You see, you could see that he was afraid because he wanted to change even the name, not only of destroy the background, he wanted to change the name of their country to Palestine. Why would he want to do that? He didn't do that to any other nation. So there's something about this. And then the final thing is, why does Hadrian want to machaper on the sin of the sale of Joseph? That made no sense at all. Because only a tzaddik would say this. I mean, look, if Hadrian didn't say this, I would say this must have been said by a tzaddik. That some tzaddik said, we have to mechaper on the chet of Yemchiras Yosef. We have to do that on the sale of Joseph. Otherwise, this will remain a constant kitrug on us. And it's true. So who would say such a piece of Torah? Some tzaddik, a Tana would say this, right? But no, who's the one that said it? That was Hadrian's idea. It wasn't Rabbi Shmuel's idea. It wasn't Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's idea. You know what I mean? That's why Rabbi Shmuel, he was shocked. He was shocked, and he actually had to substantiate it. He had to verify it with the Malachim. Why? Who ever heard of that? Every gezerah that's done on the Jews, do you ever hear of a Tana or a tzaddik having to verify that to see if it's true? I mean, if the very fact that the gezerah is done means it's true. So why would they have to check and see, is this true? So obviously there's something is happening here that is below the surface. Rabbi Shmuel had to check this because there never occurred in the mind of Klal Yisrael to somehow have a kapora for the sale of Joseph. Never. Why didn't Rabbi Shmuel come up with that idea? I ask you. Why should Hadrian come up, the Russia, and Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol doesn't come up? He was in charge of kapora. He was in charge of atonement. So why didn't he ever suggest to Klal Yisrael, we have to mechaper on the sale of Joseph? Why not? Not only he didn't do that, but Rabbi Shmuel had to go up into heaven to check it out. He was doubtful. What was he doubtful? He was doubtful whether it was true. He believed that it could be true. If Rabbi Shmuel felt that this gezerah was false, he would have checked it out. He's a Tana Olaki. But obviously, Rabbi Shmuel believed that there was something here that made sense, and this was from God. There was something in what Hadrian was saying that came from God, and he had to make sure about that because it didn't look like it. It's coming from a Roman emperor. a Roman Caesar. So he had to check out
to the
who.
Russian, he told them, Shimon, he says like this: "Va'atem kablu din shemayim aleichem," accept the din of heavens. Ki mimei avseichem lenimtze kechem v'im hoyu b'chaim. If the shvatim were here, hayisi donim lefneichem. I would make you judge the shvatim. But now that the shvatim are not here, so you can't judge the shvatim and kill the shvatim, so you have to carry his sin.
Where does it say that?
He told them like this: Atem kablu din shemayim aleichem. You guys need to accept the decree of heaven. He's telling them this is the decree of heaven. Why? From the times of the shvatim, it wasn't found tzaddikim like you. The shvatim were alive today. I would force them to be done in front of you guys, the Sanhedrin, that you should kill him.
Right.
I would force you to done the shvatim. But now that they're not here, I have no choice, and I have to substitute you for the shvatim.
Well, where does it say this?
This is all in the Machz of Yom Kippur.
I mean, what is it? Mephoshim?
No, this is the kinnis, the pismon we say right after the avodah of Kahanim. Eila esker v'nafshi by chatonu. We say this in Yom Kippur. Some places say it, some places don't say it. But it's in the Machz by chatonu terenu tlachlonu yetzirenu right after the avodah.
So it says it in the tefillah itself.
Yeah. I'm just reading from the tefillah.
So therefore, these are proofs to what I'm saying is true.
Yeah, it seems so.
But I simply said it because the story makes no sense. But I went beyond it, because just like Hadrian knew what was in the Torah, Paul, who was a Jew, surely knew this stuff. And therefore, that's why Paul wanted to create a new religion. Because he knew that the religion that he would create from Christianity would be successful. Why? Because he knew at that time the Messianic light was coming down. And Kal Yisrael was about to go into the Golus of Esau. So in some way, Paul was aware of this.
Yeah.
There's much more than
from Jesus himself. Jesus was a Talmud from a Tana.
Yeah, I think Yehoshua ben Parachia.
Yeah. I mean, Hadrian gave them time to check it out. He says, you guys could verify this on your own. Go up to heaven and verify this. He knew that they were able to go up to heaven.
Yeah.
They told him, give us 3 days and we'll go up to heaven. Rabbi Shmuel mentioned the shame from Hashem's name, and he flew up to heaven. That's what this thing says. And he met Gabriel, and Gabriel said, yeah, this is a Gezeirah from Shemayim. I heard this Gezeirah from Achorei Apargat, from behind the curtain, he said.
Yeah, I think this was in the Olam of Bria. That's what the Hecholos are. And I think Rabbi Shmuel is the author of the Sefer Hecholos. And he knew the shemus of the whole Olam Bria. Because that's what the Bez and Shemala is. The Ika Bez and Shemala is in the Olam of Bria, the Olam HaKiseh. But that's just Kabbalah.
Yeah. You also see later when the daughter of Rabbi Shmuel the daughter of the Hadrian had Rachmanis on Rabbi Shmuel, and she started crying to her father, leave him alive. And she asked her father to let him alive. The father said, I love you. I'll do anything you say, but I cannot save Rabbi Shmuel and his Chaveiro. He was on a mission. He said, those guys have to get killed.
So he knew it.
No.
He knew it because that's what he wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make sense. She was only asking him to save one Jew, one Tana. Why couldn't he do it? But somehow Hadrian knew that there was a lot at stake. And what mainly the thing was, it wasn't that Hadrian was doing the will of God. That's not what he was doing. Hadrian was a murdered Russia. But what it was is Hadrian was trying to take away the messianic machos kahanim of the Jewish people. He was after power. He was after the power of Rome. And he knew it. He said, now I got them. I got the Jews. Now I got a way to take their spiritual power from them, and we will become the mightiest nation on earth. And it's possible that even Constantine knew this, that somehow this was a tradition given to all the Caesars of Rome. And even Constantine knew that in the end Rome would become Christian. Maybe something like that. I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's possible, because why suddenly would Constantine want to become a Christian when the Romans were attacking the Christians all the time? Because it could be that somehow they all had a tradition that eventually Rome would turn into Christianity and they would have the Malchus of the world. I don't know. Maybe. But I think that
also
definitely
very
my story.
interesting Gemara. Reb Shimon, there's another Gemara that would also be proof to this. Is after they took the skin of Rabbi Shmuel off, the Gemara says once a year they would make a parade in Rome, and they would put the skin of Rabbi Shmuel on a cripple, and then they would have a mighty Roman soldier on the side, and they would say, look, his power transfers to him. Some kind of Gemara in Gittin says that they used to make a parade, and Rashi says it represents Yaakov and Esau.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You just opened up a can of worms. A lot of Gemaras.
And I'm telling you, I never read any of these things.
Help me out, guys. I think it's a Gemara in Gittin. Anybody heard of this Gemara?
Definitely.
100%. Yeah. What was the Gemara say? You remember?
Not much more than what you said.
Yeah, they used his skin. They saved it. And they used to make a parade, like a whole... They used to parade him...
Yeah, because it wasn't just the skin. You know where the skin came from? They took the skin of Rabbi Akiva, but you know where the skin of Rabbi Shmuel came from?
From Rabbi Shmuel.
From the Makom HaTfilin.
From the Makom HaTfilin, right. That's the bris. Because that skin came from the Makom HaTfilin. And Tfilin is the bris between the Rebbeinu Shem and Klal Yisrael. It's the unique relationship that the Rebbeinu Shem has with Klal Yisrael. So therefore, Klal Yisrael is Mamash Mamrak Kahanim. That lies in the Tfilin. Because the skin they took from Rabbi Akiva.
Because she liked the way he looked, the daughter. So she said, if you can't save his life, then I need you to save his skin.
Yeah.
Some kind of...
He was a very handsome man.
The reason why he was that way, he had the handsomeness from Yosef, I saw that result say.
Yeah.
That skin maybe represented Yosef or something, yeah.
Yeah. But it's from his feeling.
The rebellion from Bar Kokhba was against Hadrian or a different emperor?
It was against
Hadrian.
Know? It was Hadrian.
So somehow it ties into this also, Reb Shimon. It was against Hadrian. I mean, Bar Kokhba almost won the battle against the strongest army in the world. I mean, they were able to ride and rip out trees. This wasn't human strength. He saw openly the power of the Zichus.
Right. Well, probably the story can be expanded. Really expanded.
Yeah.
So I
hope
that
he wanted to rebuild the base of Mikdash, Reb Shimon. He wanted to rebuild the base. You know the famous story where everybody says the mashal that a lion had a bone stuck in its neck, and they asked the bird to take it out, and the bird asked for a prize.
No, that's one of the fables of Aesop.
So who said that? Who said that, Marshall? When was that said? That was said.
Hundreds. That was said. I don't know. When Yosef lived at the time of Samos, the king of Samos. That was in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece. That was way before.
Okay, but the Gemara brings this from Rabbi Shua. And the story was that Hadrian wanted them to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash and bring the Geula, I guess. And Klal Yisrael started to do it, and then he changed his mind. And Klal Yisrael wanted to revolt, and Rabbi Shua had to calm down the nation. So he said, it's enough for us that we could say that we had a dealing with Rome and we didn't die, we survived. And he said this much, then Klal Yisrael stopped. Also, Hadrian, why is he trying to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash for? He was after something.
Well, he was after a certain schus.
Yeah.
And the schus was to become the Mamrak Kohanim. Because that would have to do with the power of Rome. Hadrian was not Jewish. Hadrian was a Roman. He was a Roman emperor, and his whole concern was the power of Rome because that meant his power.
Yeah. He represented the Ketrugim of the Samach Mem.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he also knew the destiny of Rome, that Rome was a vulnerable candidate to be the leading nation of the world.
Yeah.
Something was going on at that time, which had never been told. And this is the first time I'm saying it, and I'm telling you what I believe went on. And now we found riots to it. We found places that actually indicate this. This is very good.
This is a big shear. And somehow if you could tie it in with the rebellion of Bar Kokhba, it would be a whole story.
Well, that rebellion took place in the year 140 when Rabbi Akiva was alive.
But he almost lost his kingdom to Rabbi Akiva. That's where he realized, black and white, that there's some power that Klal Yisrael has that he needs to find.
Right, they knew the Jews were not a simple people.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a medrash.
He forced the Sanhedrin to learn with them.
There's a medrash rabbah that has this mashal that you were just saying. Rabbi Shua ben Chananya.
Oh, yeah. And when did he say that? Shlomo, does the Medrash give the story? What happened?
Yeah, there's the whole story. Yeah.
What was the story?
I'll read it to you. It's Parshas. It's Bereshis Rabbah Parsha Samach Daled Piska Yud.
Okay.
But the moral of it was, they said, so they went in and took out the etzem. Bakare mitzvah shemakoro aroch v'nosan makoro sochpi v'otzias etzem amar lo ten li schari amar lo hari lech ve'yem yishtabeach v'omer nichnasti lefi ari b'shalom v'tzasi b'shalom ve'en lecha soch v'godol mizeh. Referring to Rome.
And what was the background? He wanted to build the Beis Hamikdash. Who was it? Was Hadrian? Whatever. You sure?
There was a claim that there was a merid.
So initially he wanted to build the Beis Hamikdash, and then he said they're going to be moirid, and he retracted.
No, that was used as a. Right, he was going to rebuild it, and then
he was after something.
The scheme came up to show that they were from the Kusim, that they were really going to rebel. So they gave him an eitzah. Shach b'mor lahem. Hoshiyashanu es makamo shel abayis hoshiyosifu lab chamesh amos hoshiyitchasu mimenu chamesh amos. Me'aleihem yachzru bohem. So this was a test.
So initially, he wanted to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. Then they said Lashon Hara that the Jews are going to rebel, so you retracted. Why is the Roman emperor wanting to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash? It makes no sense without Rav Shimon's Torah. He wanted to activate the power of the Gula.
Yeah, but why would he want it to activate in the sense of the Jews if he's not taking it over? They wouldn't fully explain it.
I don't know. Maybe it could be. Listen, in Rebbe's Roman friend, what was his name?
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they could have gone both ways.
Well, you want to say Adrian was really doing the Shema? That's a chiddush.
No. It was a Russian Marusha. No question about it. Maybe his initial intention wasn't that. I don't know.
Yeah, because it doesn't really fully explain it. Unless he could have done it in some corrupt form, like the Beit HaMikdash. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, when did he kill the 10 martyrs? After Bar Kokhba's rebellion? The Kiva was still alive during Bar Kokhba's.
Yeah.
Wow. So it wasn't as revenge for the rebellion. The Gemara says that he also plowed the Ritzvah Azara. He wanted to destroy Ad Yisoid. He wanted to destroy the whole floor of the Beit HaMikdash. Shouldn't be a Zeich of the Beit HaMikdash. So he plowed it into a field. That was him, Hadrian.
Yeah, because they were completely threatened by the Jews. This was not a normal thing. Rome knew who the Jews were. Obviously, there was a lot of spiritual things happening at the same time between Rome and the Jews. This was not like Rome against the Britons or Rome against the Gauls or Rome against the Germans. This is a very different things. They were just nations that the Rome conquered. The Jews, Rome wanted to conquer the spirituality of the Jews and take over the Broch of Yitzchak, Yadayim and the Esau, that they would become the greatest nation on earth. And the truth is, the Christians, which come from Rome, became the greatest nation on earth. And they still are.